All right. And the Sundance music cues, that's the beginning of the show. And we have a very special guest today, Brian McGroarty.
You got it.
From Core Title. Brian is a master networker. He knows how to build teams, manage teams, build relationships. And we're going to dive into a lot of business development talk today. We're going to talk into a lot of, who is your ideal client and how do you keep them happy once they become a client. And we're going to get into a lot of fun stuff today. And Brian's a good friend of mine, so we're gonna talk about everything from A to Z. So Brian, thanks for stopping on the show.
Oh, 100%, man. Happy to be here. Love doing things like this. Sharing knowledge, obviously having just a good conversation in general. Of course, you're a good friend, so I don't mind hanging out with you for a little bit too.
Yeah, and we already kind of started the show. We covered already some topics that we're going to get into, but Brian has ventured into the podcast realm prior to joining or visiting the studio for today. And we just want to give a special shout out to Sweet Recording Studio. They do a great job here of being able to take the burden off the host and put a lot of things into play. And I want to hear a little bit about kind of your journey on the podcast realm, because you mentioned it. You have that personality that not everybody might possess. Everyone has something to say, but not everyone can really deliver the message.
Appreciate that.
And you are a natural. So let me hear a little bit about your story.
Yeah, it was COVID time. And the hardest part in anything was delivering a message. This is the time before, the popular word of misinformation even came out or whatever. And at the time, real estate was changing just like that. And so if I called every one of my clients, by the time I got to like 50, the message had already changed. Because we had no idea what we were doing with COVID, whether we could be in or out or go this place or not that place, or, how were the townships handling things? How was the state handling things? And things it became a mess. And so, we started some Facebook community pages, and that was tough. And then that became to the point where I watched one of my competitors try to say, here's what it is. And he wasn't wrong in what he said. Maybe the tone I probably wouldn't have chosen from my own personal page, but it just created a firestorm. And it wasn't in a good way, because people are like, well, what do you mean? And then there was follow-up questions. And imagine like 200 of your clients literally coming into this room right now, asking you questions all at the same time.
I already have goosebumps of getting scared.
Yeah, it was a lot. And so as a company, we tried to do our best to figure out the best way to handle that. A lot of it was a case-by-case basis. A lot of it was, failing forward. But that's the one thing we did as a company really well during that time, is figured it out.
Failing forward is good.
And went on the fly. But for the podcast side, a lot of my friends that were doing their best to try to make ends meet, that own restaurants, that own gyms. I mean, if you remember during that time, they were demagogue pretty harsh.
Absolutely.
And I mean, these are people just trying to put food on their plate.
Absolutely.
So there's always that, remember those old like posters used to have on the wall of like the motivational posters?
Which ones, Brian?
It was like, there's so many of them. There are, every corporate person had like 10 of them in their hallway. But one of them was like telling the story, like the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. Everybody sees up here, but they don't realize
right. The Freudian iceberg.
Underneath, yeah.
I thought you at first you were trying to talk about what posters I had in my room as a child.
No. Really let's not go down that road. Kind of keep it PG.
But yeah, the iceberg and what people see at the top and all the other underlying things that are going on behind closed doors.
So there was my mother used to have a PR firm, and she used to have this great thing, is she took like an old book. And on it was like a nice binding to it. Yeah. And on it said, "The greatest story never told." Okay. And so when you'd flipped it open, it said, "It's your story, own it." And that was like her whole thing. Wow. It was like a journal.
Yeah, it's cool.
But it was cool because it was like really all like beat up, whatever. Really
cool.
But she would like hand that to people.
Yeah.
And that was like her thing. And I said, "Hey, you mind if I steal that?" And I told her about what I want to do. She's like, "Yeah, sure." So I started doing this thing. Yeah. Using a streaming service. Not knocking everything here. Everything's great. It's awesome. Yeah. But it was a totally different way to communicate with people.
I could be totally wrong, but can I ask you a question about the most recent event that we participated in? Yeah, there was an old book on that flyer. Was there any connection?
No, that was totally AI.
It was really cool. A good segue into that event. Bri recently threw on a masterpiece.
Thank you.
True masterpiece. It was real estate focused, but there was a panel of very highly successful individuals with a lot of knowledge. You had a great turnout, awesome venue. Shout out to Soundplex.
Yes.
Great place.
Oh, yeah.
On the way in, I was
cool.
joking about him. I thought I was going to get whacked.
Yep.
But it's a speakeasy vibe when you get in there. It's beautiful, but it's, from the outside, you might not know what's in there. So if you guys maybe check out on Instagram, Soundplex, awesome spot.
Yes.
You threw an amazing event.
Thank you.
Asked some really great questions. Everything was properly done. And I think, and we communicated afterwards because I was just respectfully having to, thank you, because I, from one perspective, have been doing this for maybe 3 years, business development.
Right.
I know you've been doing it a lot longer. And to see that unfold from start to finish, because I know we were involved from the beginning, from the sponsorship phase, the execution was flawless.
Thank you.
So what were your takeaways from that event?
Believe it or not, I'm glad that you said the execution was flawless. It's almost like, let's say, no matter how great you take care of your car, you always know where there's like a little ding or a dent, and nobody else knows that.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So I'm glad that you perceived it that way, and I'll just kind of keep it as that.
No.
But to answer your question, to have execution like that, it's you make a lot of mistakes. You make a ton of mistakes doing them, and after you've done 100 events, you know what to expect. What not to expect, what becomes important to people, what would keep people engaged. You learn some, tricks of the trade over the years, and sometimes you just try things and see how that works. But for the most part, that was based off of research that I did ahead of time. And I talked to a lot of investors, and I said, what is it that you didn't like or I think that's missing in these events? And after, a handful of conversations with these guys and gals, I got a lot of similar things. And so I was like, all right, these are the things I need to include, and I need to make sure that it flows this way. And I also need to make sure that they get what they're asking for. There's a phenomenal book called Raving Fans. Okay. Highly recommend it. Easy read.
Good for me.
Yeah. And then the one thing they talk about in there, and I'll just keep that short and sweet, is that you might have a great idea about how to run your business and how to execute it and everything like that. But then you take that out into the real world and then realize that your target audience doesn't want that at all.
Interesting.
Or maybe they want a smaller version of that. Maybe they want a watered down version. Maybe they just need a tweak to that. Who knows? And that's why they do those sample sizes. That's why they do all those surveys and things of that nature. But I made sure I did that before I went with my idea.
Interesting. So, and no different than something we're trying to at the agency level. We were hyper-focused these past couple of years. New business, new customers, new customers. When's the last time you checked in with your current customers that have been with you for 10 years?
They already like you, right?
And they like you, but like you said, maybe you are doing something and maybe they need the more watered down version. Maybe, the current marketing that we might be doing might be too insurance focused, using too much large vernacular or terms where they're just losing us.
Right.
Whereas we could just treat them like people and say, you've been with us for 10 years, you live on a body of water, shouldn't you have flood insurance?
Right.
And just communicate with them a little bit more clearly instead of giving them statistics on statistics. So we ran a few customer surveys, especially of our VIP customers, and we learned a lot.
Yeah.
So I think that's smart. You took that approach to kind of survey other event goers and other events in the past, and then you kind of formulated that event.
Yeah, and you need to find people that aren't afraid to tell you that your event was terrible.
Yeah.
Like if you have somebody that's always, fluffing you up, that's not a good friend. Like you need somebody to be real with you.
I hear you, man. I hear you. And you bring up a good point in the fact that, we recently threw an event at the Philmont Country Club, which was a good success for our summer intern. He had about 70 people show up.
Huge.
Always interesting. RSVPs are usually a lot higher than what shows up. And people reached out, the attendees reached out and said, that was a really great event. I appreciate it. In my head, I thought it was a good event, but you could always think it could be better.
Of course. But there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that, no. So.
But you learn to improve. I remember I did a short sale seminar back when that was really great with one of my good friends. He's a real estate attorney. And I remember promoting it because we didn't have, social media wasn't big back then.
No.
I was literally knocking on brokers' doors and saying, hey, we're throwing this short sale seminar. They're like, for what? And I was like, what do you
Yeah.
You're a broker, right?
Yeah.
Short sales, like the houses, they're underwater. And like, sometimes I was selling.
You were trying to sell them to go to the,
Right. And so the first one, I had like 20, 25. Next one, 35. Next one, packed. Next one, sold out. So
consistency.
And then it was the part of, luckily I had a phenomenal events coordinator, and she just got it, and we were on page. And it's funny, the last year that we did it down there, they changed ownership, and then I walked in, and then everything was like wrong, and I was like, what is this?
What's going on?
And you know, the guy's like, what do you mean? What's the problem? I was like, you're literally having them walk through all these tables and chairs that are upside down to go to somewhere nice.
So you have that vision. You have that vision.
Always.
And that it's like, I don't want to, you know, when I speak to you, I realize there's a lot of things that are going through, you know, your head in terms of event planning, and to the listener engaging, you know, who wants to take a nugget home with them, you know, if they want to throw their first event, right? What would you tell that person?
Do it with some friends, or do it with somebody that's done it before. If you do it by yourself, I mean, you can do that. But the thing is that, and in any good position in life, you want to have some type of mentor. You want to have somebody that you can learn from. I mean, all the networking that I learned, I didn't just pick that up one day. People taught me how to do that.
Sure.
And I, you know, made it my own. But what I can say is that when you're throwing an event, you need to understand what the trials and tribulations are. I mean, if you are part of those big golf outings and charity balls and things, they have teams of people.
Yes.
I mean, 20, 30 people to get sponsorships, to get this, to get that. And it's an arsenal. It's not just one person running it. You can't. It's you won't be able to do your job.
I appreciate that transparency. So for those of you who are thinking about throwing something, because I think that's the biggest hindrance in them all, just getting started.
Right.
Find a mentor, find a friend. There's a lot more moving parts than you think. And I feel like the only way you start realizing that is when you start.
Yeah.
And that might be enough to defeat you to not continue to commit. So for all those listening, I mean, if you're in the real estate space, the insurance space, the title space, and you want to throw an event, or you might want some help, I mean, Bri, I'm sure you would give your knowledge, and I won't call myself a pro, but I've thrown some good ones. So I know what I'm doing. And when I don't, I ask Bri. So that was a good caveat. I appreciate we brought that up. You know, I wanted to, you know, give a little bit of information, tactile information for the listener in terms of the networking. And at this point, I want to just segue into what got you involved in title insurance.
Oh, it was a change in my life.
Okay.
There was, at the time, well, I'll start really quick and I'll sum up. I got out of college. I have a degree in psychology. And I realized I didn't want to do anything with psychology because I would have been dead up to my eyeballs. And with a degree that I thought I wanted, I wouldn't have the respect for in the doctoral community. So I was like, well, geez, unless I can teach Shaquille O'Neal how to hit free throws or write some book, I don't know if I'm going to make the money that I want either. So, you know, I started going a different route. My mother always said, you know, well, you know, you're a sales guy. You're always born a salesperson. You're going to be an attorney or a salesperson. It's either one or the other. Yeah. I already kind of went halfway on you know, college. So I was like, I don't know if that's that. So I actually started working with her at a PR firm. And, you know, she's like, I think, you know, you could even do something with this. You know, what do you think? And PR is tough. People don't realize what goes into it. Like those big firms, they have different levels. Like when you get to executive level and you're in the board and you're presenting, you've been in that game for 15, 20 years. Like you don't even see that presentation room because you're the person doing the grunt work behind the scenes, getting the data, getting the analytics, doing all the comparisons, doing the surveys, doing the case studies, you know, just to get the data to prove to the person that you want to potentially get as a prospect that you're worth your weight in gold.
Interesting.
Like it's a whole thing. And so, I mean, when I say literally you sit there and stare at a computer, that's not me. I can't. I
get it. I get it.
So her running a business, she says, well, you know, Bri, I need help because people are coming in here and prospecting me every day. I can't take these meetings. You take them. I said, deal. So I took them. I met some of the worst salespeople you could ever meet in your entire life. Forget your name, which is most people do anyway, but like bad, not even close.
Yeah.
You know, they would tell you one thing and then like they would lose their train of thought. It was a lot of entry level sales that would come through the doors, like, you know, payroll people and, you know, copier people and whatever else. So it was just kind of comical. It was a lot of fun, you know, going over those meetings at lunchtime. But I ended up running into this one gal and she got me into the payroll business. And I was really impressed by her. She was very well organized. She, you know, articulated herself very well. She was confident, presented, you know, she didn't smell funny, you know, kind of like weird things.
Like the little things, right? They all
but I mean, you would think there would be like basic stuff. Sure. You know what I mean? Like don't smell funny when you go in there. But I took a liking to her, and I said, hey, listen, do you think there might be an opportunity for me at your company? And so, I interviewed, I did the whole thing. I worked my way up to become district manager of that South Philadelphia territory. And selling payroll in South Philly was an event in itself.
Yep.
And so, it definitely calloused me in a lot of ways. It helped me to take rejection. They had a great sales model, so it took me through steps of the sale. Moving forward, I ended up partnering up with a gentleman that owned a credit card processing company. So like when you're swiping credit cards.
Of course. So big right now. Merchant services. So big.
So there were some gentlemen that I ended up knowing through the business, and he called me up one day and he said, this is after many conversations. Hey, Bri, I'd love for you to come work with us. And I love the guy. His name's Nick. And I said, and he probably is going to laugh if he hears this. And I said, yeah, Nick, I'm good. And, I got this Fortune 300 job or whatever. I thought it was the best thing ever, I'm working for this big company. And he says, he's like, well, I thought you would say that. So I emailed you a spreadsheet. Go look at it while I'm on the phone. I said, okay. And so I opened it up, and it's a big spreadsheet. And of all the people that I had referred to him over the time, he's like, this is what I make every single month after all the people that you referred over to me that we signed up. And he goes, I'm going to give you half, and that's going to be your start. And I said,
done.
All right, let's go.
That's awesome. That is so awesome.
So that was cool. That was great. And then that was working well. I started networking everywhere. There wasn't an event that I didn't go to. And I was only at that time, the only merchant services guy, because back then merchant services were really just stuck with banks. Sure. And those guys didn't go out. They just went to the branches.
Yeah.
So when I went anywhere, if you were small business, big business,
anybody,
I clean up.
That's awesome. At such a time where it was so new, right? So, look where we're at now.
Oh, it's changed dramatically.
But that's awesome.
Yeah. That was when I was walking around, selling them little machines and stuff. But anyway, that was going great. And there's a phone back in the day. It was called a Palm Pilot. I don't know if you remember that thing.
I have to look back.
Oh, dude, it was the clunkiest thing. You could literally throw it down a flight of steps and it'd be totally fine.
Okay.
But it had a little stylus with it or whatever. It was like a smartphone before this thing.
Understood. Yeah.
Became popular. And I remember looking at my residuals one day. I was going to a Notre Dame game. It was my first big football game with my ex-girlfriend at the time. And I look at it and I was like, man, they look a little low. That's not what it should be. And I was like, oh, no big deal. And she's like, you all right? And I was like, yeah, we're fine. Just we'll be careful this weekend. And so the next weekend, the stock market had this correction. And then I'm looking at this and I'm a young guy. I'm in my mid-20s and I'm thinking is this going to be Great Depression? What's happening? And, moving forward, I just realized it was a market correction. But what happened is that time lending was at a totally different time. If people think that there was predatory lending, they don't even know what it was like back then. If you had a reflection in the mirror and, at a pulse, you could get a $250,000 loan just like that. Yeah. Stated income loans, whatever. And I started getting phone calls. One in particular, this gentleman, he owned a fire flood restoration company. 17 years in the business, did great. He wanted to expand. He wanted to scale upwards. And Citibank was giving $250,000 lines of credit, again, for having a reflection in the mirror. So I hooked him up with the person that I knew because he wanted to scale. And maybe 7 or 8 months later, I get a phone call from him. Brian, I'm going out of business. I need you to help me get out of these contracts. I said, what do you mean? What's going on, Steve? I was like, what happened? And then, wouldn't you know, he, instead of leasing products, he bought them. And then he was traveling up and down. He just spent this line of credit like crazy and couldn't afford to pay all the interest back on it. And then I started getting a lot of those phone calls. People that I would save $300 a month on in the processing and other supplemental services as well. I just wasn't selling credit card processing. And what was happening was they were trying to switch for $30 a month because they just needed to save something. They were spending horribly.
Wow. And
I started getting these phone calls left and right. Now, as a young guy, that's scary.
Absolutely.
People that you thought were listen, sometimes when you just look at somebody and you're in your 20s or teens or whatever, you just look at it as an adult and you're like, oh, they're an adult. They have their stuff together. No. There's a lot of people that don't.
Yeah.
And that was a rude awakening. But anyway, I remember thinking to myself, maybe this is a time for me to exit. And I was having a drink with a good friend of mine that I used to do the short sale presentations with, and he and I used to wait tables together while he was getting his law degree.
Interesting.
And this is before we all became something and whatever. And I said, hey man, I think I need to get out of this. But the problem is I'm a young guy and I got sales experience and I've run teams and I've executed a lot of stuff. I'm getting told no because I'm overqualified.
Interesting.
And so I need to start somewhere, and I'm okay with starting somewhere. I just need to make sure that I kind of have a way in.
Sure.
He said, you ever think about title insurance? I said, what the hell's title insurance?
What is it, right? Isn't that always the follow-up?
What's it now? Like 15 years later, here I am. But that whole thing, that story of me becoming who I am and that process molded me in a variety of different ways, because I'll tell you what, the part where I was briefly alluded to, I was referring a lot of business out.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, when I was that guy at the top of the food chain constantly giving out business, and when I needed somebody's help, there's not that many people that picked up that phone to return that phone call.
That's very interesting.
So now when I take that part as the guy that's asking for business, I take that their business that they're giving me very, very seriously.
Right.
Because I know what it's like to be that person that's the rainmaker and hand out that business.
That's very interesting.
So,
and a great story. And I really appreciate you going kind of soup to nuts from the beginning to the end, because the
sorry,
moral...
it's too long-winded.
Oh, wait, we got more than enough time.
Okay.
Joe will knock on the door if we have to leave. But the main purpose or the main mantra, moral, whatever you want me to call it, is your relationships with people, the way you treated people. And I love that. Open your email and look at that list. That's all the people you referred me, kind of like that giver's gain model. Like you were operating from the very beginning as somebody who just gave. And when it was time to receive, you mentioned that you felt like, there wasn't a quick pickup on the phone from your end. So I think from the networking scene too, a lot of people who might be listening might attend a couple events and maybe do the right thing by giving first, and then not immediately see a return, and then it's like, I'm done. Now you went pretty much your whole entire business career giving, and now you say, when someone reciprocates and gives you a piece of business, you take it very seriously.
100%.
So for those listening, I mean, the world kind of just works in a funny way where karma, whatever you want to call it, equilibrium, eventually you will give.
Yeah.
And eventually you will get. But I think the sooner you start giving, then the quicker you're going to start receiving.
100%.
So
you have to be that person that's willing to act first in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
There's got to be. I hate when people say, "Oh, you got to provide value." That's not something that you can just, what's valuable to you, is not valuable to me.
So true.
So
very true.
And that's where I think the better question that should happen is an expectations conversation.
Yes.
Is what is it that you need from me in order to make this relationship worth? And then here's the biggest part: what I expect of you in return from what I'm going to try to give you to make that happen.
Absolutely.
Right. And then from that part, it's a level playing field.
Yep.
You're going to do this part. I'm going to do this part. We're going to make this all work, and let's go.
And checking in too, right? Like, if you have a referral partner and, okay, I gave him 3 things, or I gave her 3 things and I only got 1 thing, and it's just too transactional. But if you were to sit down with that referral partner, and I know you do a really great job of this, you'll just post something, hey, I'm having coffee, anybody want to come? You touch base with your referral partners. What you might have gave back 2 years ago might not be what they need now. So you can be continuing to give them what you gave them 2 years ago, and that's not really what they're trying to target. So I think it's important to set the expectation, check in with your referral partners or your relationships just like they were your friends. I mean, hopefully they are your friends, because that always works out a lot better.
Oh, for sure.
But
sometimes there's also needs to be boundaries as well.
Yeah, some boundaries that have to exist. But business networking is no different than relationships. And I think, we touched on this earlier, and it's comical, so I want to bring it up. It's like we network so much. We're at so many events. We're shaking so many hands. We're trying to give, and we're taking photos. Yeah. And we both share the similarity that our girlfriends are jealous because we don't take enough photos with them. So,
well, I mean, I'll say this: I wouldn't use the word jealous.
Yeah.
So, what I would say is the thing is, we get into our habits, and we get into our sales habits. And in fact, a buddy of mine, his family ran a sales training company. And they used to use the Sandler sales training model, which was like a Socratic method of sales. Okay, there
we used it for some of our agents.
Oh yeah, and so he would he would get into an argument with his wife, and then all of a sudden he'd start like, well, how does that make you feel? Tell me more about that. And then she's like, stop sales training.
Stop
whatever.
Sandlering me.
Yeah, exactly. And what I could say, the most important thing, when we'll just say this is a work-life balance. is that I try to make sure that I am present when I am with my girlfriend. And then they're also in the same sense too with, you know, with my family, with my son, with anybody that I'm with.
Absolutely.
And don't get me wrong, you slip up, but don't be afraid to take that constructive criticism when somebody says you're not showing up or whatever, because here's the best part is at the end of this conversation, there's a solution and you can make that choice whether or not, all right, can I try to make this a little bit better? Is it really so bad that I may or may not try this? Or, you know, and most of the time, I don't think there's not many, I've actually had this conversation with several people. Not many people are just straight up malicious and awful. They just, maybe they think about it or whatever. Life happens, the phone rings or whatever. But imagine, I mean, your perfect self, right? And the only difference between me and my perfect self is a choice. And so when that opportunity strikes where it says, you know, you talk to your significant other, hey, miss you today. You know, hope you're having a great day. Love you. Right. Or versus like, oh, Instagram, you know, whatever. And then you don't do that text message. Imagine the ripple effect that you just avoided in a negative way because you just didn't make that 2.5 second text message.
100%.
You know, so sometimes you just got to say to yourself, I could have done that.
Yeah. That concept of that butterfly effect, or every you know, small ripple is a tsunami on the other side of the world. Yeah, I guess so. I get that, and I think also be intentional with the time that you're given, whether it is with your family or your significant other, or whether it's on that Zoom call that you really don't want to be on. You're like, God, this guy put himself on my calendar. It's 15 minutes. It's kind of at the end of the day on a Friday, and you're doing other things in the corner of your screen. You know, so trying to be intentional with everything you do. It's like working that muscle memory. Yes, it becomes easier because inversely, it's funny how when you start slipping up on a few things, or I'm going to cancel this meeting, I'm not going to, you know, do this today, I'm not going to do that. It becomes easier to say I'm not going to do this. Yes. So you have to.
And I think though too is that people understand. I was just chatting with a good friend that I've known for a long time, and we're doing some business together. And the other night they sent me a deal, and they said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that I sent you this deal. I'm not trying to interrupt family time. It's obviously a little bit." And when I was younger, that text message would have came at 9:30 with no apology or whatever. Now it's coming at 7-ish. People know that I have a child, and they're just saying, I'll connect with you tomorrow. That's good. You know, more so that so they don't forget. They're like, okay, I did what I needed to do. And there's got to be a mutual level of respect, you know, for that time, for that space. Yes. Because listen, I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, sure, we want to be really successful and do all the things we want to do, but why are we doing that? So we have freedom to actually spend it with the people that we love the most. So, you know, I think when you do have that time, and some of it you're never going to be able to get back. So you have to make sure that you're present. Work
to live versus live to work, I guess, you know, so it's a good point. And now with new clients, because I know a lot of your relationships stem over the multiple years you've been, you know, in different industries and working in the networking scene, business development scene. When you have a new client, a brand new client, do you make it known to set that expectation, or is that more of like a...
In what regard? Like what do you mean?
In terms of like because I'll bring it up because I still get the weekend texts, I get the weekend calls. Like, as you know, we do a lot of business insurance. So a lot of our clients are restaurants and bars and operating on the weekends. And I have some success stories, I'll call them, during my younger years with the firm where I was, you know, hopping in the car, going up on a car washing roof, taking claim photos, submitting them to Nationwide on Saturday night at 8:00, and using that as an ability to kind of tell our story. And now I'd probably still do it, but I'd be like, the select few I do it for, just because I'm trying to find that work-life balance.
Well, I would say this is that if I what's your favorite, like, bourbon or something? What's your?
I mean, I like Johnny Walker.
Okay. So let's say I come and say, hey man, thank you for the show. It was great. And I put a bottle of Johnny Walker on there, right? And then you're like, Brian, that was really awesome. And like, you might even think about that bottle. And like, even at the time you take a sip or whatever, and you're like, oh, was that bottle? You know, whatever. There's going to be a story to it, right? It's significant. But if I literally bring you a bottle of Johnny Walker every single week, it loses its value. It loses its luster. So, you know, a friend of mine talked about gifting. And so what I would say, the gift sometimes that you're obviously giving is your time. So whatever message that you're trying to convey, if you're going to be the person that I'm around 24/7, be careful, because it might get exactly what you're like selling. Sure. You know, and then the problem is once you turn on that faucet, it's really hard to turn off. Sure. You know, so to answer your question, I would say yes, an expectation goes with everybody and not just business people. every person in your life.
Yeah.
Your family, your friends, your significant other. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. And I'll say this, do your damnedest to keep to that every single thing that you say.
Sure.
So
I hear that.
Yeah.
And it's so true that younger in the career, your time is, I guess, less of value to you. You're willing to do more, and then you need to kind of draw that line. So good information.
Yeah.
I like the dilution of your time too, right? People will start seeing that as not as important to them because you're always available. So that's interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know you're a big sports fan. Go Birds.
Yes.
You know, Phillies, Red October, a lot going on.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about maybe how you've used the Philly sports scene or just Philadelphia in general to kind of not reward, but also like build relationship with your clients? Like, do you find that a useful tool for those listening who I know, look to get to know some people in the Wells Fargo Center, get to know people at Citizens Bank because they are in the business development scene and they value the experience of sending their clients either with them or with their loved ones to a game. Do you find value in that?
I do. And anything, people say business isn't personal, and I hate that statement. It is. Everything's personal. And if you, did you ever read the book, The 5 Love Languages?
Yes.
Great book.
Yeah.
It's not just a great book for couples or things of that nature. It's actually a good book for just humanity and people to understand how people receive information and love and a variety of other things. And that love could come not just necessarily as your significant other, but also the attention that you might give to somebody. So maybe some person would love the fact that you gave them a bottle of Johnny Walker. Another person would be like, oh, that's great. But what if I wrote you like this handwritten awesome thing, and then you're like, oh, I love that much more because it's just different significance, So coming back to what we were talking about with sports is that anytime that I am with somebody, I do my best to try to make an impact. I don't want to take up too much of their time. I want to make it fun. I want to make it memorable. Over time, you get to learn like a little bit different things. But the other thing you got to remember is like, you're going to be with somebody. If like you're golfing, you're going to be with somebody for 4 hours.
Good point.
Maybe
I was
even
saying
longer.
you don't want to take up too much people's time, but if they're a golf lover and they don't mind that 4 hours being out on the course, then you tailor your experience to them.
Well, I'm going to give you a different experience.
Okay.
If you don't like them that much, do not go hang out with them for 4 hours. No.
Unless you're going to win trophies with Bri over here.
I'll stop. No, it's if let's say somebody's like super social, right? And they can crack jokes and you enjoy your times. You'd hang out with them on a weekend. Yeah, sure. Maybe take them golfing or create an opportunity or environment where maybe they can meet other people.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different ways.
Yeah. Or the sports, right? We'll use sports. If they're not a talker, they're more introverted, but they love baseball.
Right.
I mean, you could sit next to somebody and they could be in the game and logged in and they would just appreciate you being there. And maybe you don't have to do too much talking because that could be a version. So I think what I'm trying to get at too is, and I'm trying to do this with the team. So in terms of like building teams and motivating, sales are obviously, they drive everything that goes on at REMCO in terms of the producers. Some of them are like real hard on themselves. I'm only as good as my last month or my last sale. And then other ones, they really value the work-life balance. So trying to take care of each member of the team. Yeah. So we're rolling out, I guess, if you will, like a employee survey.
Yeah.
What are your favorite foods? What's your favorite drink? What are your likes? What are your dislikes? You know, if you found a $100 gift card on the ground and it could be to anywhere, where would you spend that $100? Yeah. So I guess trying to do this too internally to kind of reward and personalize that gives.
So you're saying from like an employee level versus...
From an employee level, thinking of it just a little bit more, I guess just my brain is at that point right now because I'm trying to do that internally. But it's very similar to, I guess, your relationships, your network, or your referral partners, trying to personalize the experience.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll give you a couple different examples. My father used to say compensation comes in many different forms. And so for him, it was like, I just don't want bills. And so he would negotiate his contracts when he was a sales guy to be, oh, you're going to pay for my car or you're going to pay for this or my cell phone or whatever. And so his bills ended up being his mortgage.
That's cool.
Right. Yeah. And so what I can say on that side is like, there's an attorney that I was chatting with and he wanted to hire somebody and, they were watching Suits and they wanted to make their $200,000 coming right out of law school. And he's like, you're not bringing anything to the table and you're just doing the work that I'm giving you. Why? How could I even pay you that much money? And they didn't get that. They just think I'm, got $1 bajillion in debt and I should get this because somebody told me.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Interesting.
So what I told them, I said, well, maybe you need to understand how they think and they operate. And you're already starting, in my opinion, the right thing is asking and what makes them tick. Because what if you sat as an employer and you looked at that person, you said, well, instead of giving you, I'm just making up numbers here,
sure,
an $80,000 base, I'm going to give you a $65,000 base, and then I'm going to pay for a $15,000 vacation for you. Now, you as an owner are going to understand the immediate tax benefits that I just created for you.
Yep.
And then in the flip side of that, of what you could do as a whole, I've watched, companies do big parties, big year-end things or whatever. Everybody finds value in different things.
So true.
And so what I would say is while I know you have to be careful of offering one thing or another person or whatever, I also believe though too is that maybe somebody likes that vacation. Maybe they're just like, no, I just want time with my family. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
That could be it. It could be a variety of things.
You might be shocked, and you might either, and generally from what I've read, understood, and what I'm starting to see is what you think they want, it's usually not right. What you think they want, it's more expensive.
Right.
So taking the time to just check in and have that personalized conversation. Maybe even on an annual basis, check in with people annually, what they want when they didn't have a kid. Now we have the kid. We love, a weekend getaway, at a place up in the mountains where I can get, have the kids stay with mom or something like that. So asking those questions. So for those listening, I try to bring it back. Sometimes I remember early with getting out here, it was all transactional. It was like, I'm an insurance broker. I'm trying to build a team.
Right.
If you send me leads, I'll send you something, or if there's a way for us to rub shoulders and make each other money, that now it's kind of like leading with intentions, leading with actions, leading with, referring them to other people within their network who can get them business, and then just sitting back and just waiting for the return.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of times people would ask me about things, as a title person, like, can I deliver this? And I was like, no. And they're like, I'm like, where did you hear that? And they're like, somebody told me. I'm like, why did they tell you that?
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, I don't know. Yeah. And I was like, that's the trouble with things. Sometimes you get bad information from people. Yeah. They tell you that, oh, this person or this vendor should do this for you. Mm-hmm. They should pay this bill. They should do whatever. And then what happens? You expect it, right? Instead of appreciating the fact that somebody took a couple dollars out of their pocket and paid a tab.
Interesting.
Or took time out of their day or a weekend off or whatever.
Yeah.
And going back to kind of what we were saying with the sports events, and not just from more of a business development side, not an employee side. Believe it or not, the human interaction is the most pivotal part of that day. Mm-hmm. And you could sit there for 9 innings and watch a baseball game, but do you know where I had made the most, we'll call it damage?
The concession stand.
Close. The tailgate prior.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I've been a part of those, and they're great. You guys put a great job together.
But I like to keep mine small. You know what I mean? I don't throw big ones.
We've discussed this too. We've discussed this too, because then you start to draw, especially I would say in the phases of your career, my career, where I'm trending. I want to be quality over quantity. Yeah. I mess it up every time I try to say it, but keeping it a little bit more intimate. Mm-hmm. I think what I've learned, and I just want to make sure we cover this at some point, is what I learned from Core and how you guys operate is you do title insurance. Mm-hmm. We know. I sell insurance. We know. Mm-hmm. But the focus that you guys put on the individual, let's just say the realtor, how they can build their business, right? How you can help them manage, build their teams, their business. You take it totally outside of your realm of title insurance.
Oh yeah.
And I guess for realtors listening out there, I mean, if you were to join a team, I know you get more leverage, you get more assistance, you get more support. But for those realtors out there who are just starting, who might not have the team, might not have the support, and you might need to know how to get from A to B and B to C, Core is a good spot to start.
Appreciate that.
Yes.
It's I'll say this is it's not for everybody. Mm-hmm. Just like sales, it's not for everybody. Can you make a significant amount of money in your business, my business, real estate, lending and mortgages? Yes, of course you can. But you got to put in the work. Mm-hmm. Again, you might see where I'm at now and say, oh, wow, I could do that. You might be able to. Hell, you might be able to do it quicker than me. Great. But, I had to go through a whole process in which I had to learn, I had to figure out what was my sales process, what worked. And then while I'm doing that, times were changing. Rates are coming down, or rates are going up. There's a lot of different factors that went into play. And, the hardest part, believe it or not, isn't just, and Mark McKenna told me this one time, the hardest part is not just necessarily, doing great business in a couple of years. It's doing great business over the span of 10 years, 15 years, 20 years.
With the peaks and valleys of the industry and all the changes. Yeah.
Right. That's a great agent or that's a great, a sales professional. And I think more than anything is that you have to be willing to be happy with the journey and not necessarily the results.
Absolutely.
Because if you're not content with that journey and the trials and tribulations that go along with that and the learning part about that, you're not going to last.
Absolutely. And the battle scars, right? Like I when I got involved in insurance, mortgages, I use mortgages because it's the most direct example that I can think of.
Yeah.
I had like 10 buddies who were doing a good job in the mortgage space.
Okay.
The rates rose, I know 2 of them out of the 10 who are still in mortgages.
Yeah.
So those 2 that have gotten their battle wounds and continue to, they can probably do anything now once things narrow out.
Oh, a good salesperson can sell anything.
So
they just happen to be sitting in that seat at that one time.
Yeah.
And it also just shows you too, the other guys might have been selling on rate. And the other guys are selling on perhaps something different.
And that's a good point. I don't think in the insurance world, we don't talk about that enough right now. The home and auto product, I had my uncle leave us for $10 savings a month. I'm like, thanks, uncle. Don't come to Thanksgiving. But you try to sell them on the service. You try to sell them on the process of navigating their account outside of just the price. And sometimes, most of the time, especially in business insurance, price does not dictate.
Right.
It's really making sure that you have someone knowledgeable enough to lay down the right products as your business evolves. And I'll give you one quick example.
Sure.
We had this one golf simulator company that, it was one exposure. So you're writing insurance to cover the simulator and the people that are in it. Then he decided to build a bar on the second floor.
Whole different mess.
And then a putt-putt shack on the very top. So, as these businesses evolve, the policy that they have changes.
Right.
So having a broker who checks in with you and kind of no different than what you do with your realtors and build a business plan around them to scale. Because what else are we doing in business if we're not going to scale?
Oh, yeah. That conversation is always evolving and always changing. There should be check-in periods. There's a quote that I heard one time, and it came from one of those made for TV, Marvel superhero things. I forget what it was, but it was regarding a plan. And one of the villains says this one time, understand that, you're going to have a plan. You're going to think it's great. It's awesome. And then what you need to say is, I'm going to execute this plan to its entirety. And then also know that plan will eventually fail. And that you're now going to have to go back to the drawing board, think on your feet, and then execute the rest of the plan. And then rinse and repeat until that becomes perfection.
Right.
Or the evolving plan to learn from. And a lot of times people, like you said, they get to the one part, this didn't work the way I wanted to. And instead of just learning from that, like how I had to do with events.
Sure.
Now I have this thing of I remember when that happened and, I'm never going to do that again.
These fail safes in for you.
Oh, 100%.
Backup plans and things like that.
And even, you gave me a great compliment in the beginning, and I can tell you the things that I'm going to change for next time, and even things that went wrong that I'm going to prevent from not happening again.
Right.
So, the best thing you can do is when you understand at the end, this is the most important to any event, any relationship. What do you want at the end of this, event? What do you want to happen from this relationship? That has to be the goal. And then believe it or not, the easiest thing to do is just work backwards from that.
Right.
So if you have whatever that top tier goal is, and then you say, okay, well, where would I be from this? Oh, well, I would have now gotten to the part where I had 40 people that attended or whatever. And you're going down this realm, and then before you know it, you're like, oh, so all I got to do is do all this stuff?
To get there. So how important, because you bring up a really good point in terms of getting to that end result, right?
Yeah.
Do you find it important to make sure that your sponsors for that event, because I just want to dive into that a bit, because I know a lot of young people who are trying to throw events have trouble, either raising money for the event or getting sponsorship. Is it important for your sponsors of that event to share the same vision, Or do you feel like what the sponsors might be wanting to get out of it is different than what you're trying to get out of it?
Well, that's actually the expectations conversation I have with every one of them. In fact, I called you about that.
Did. Yes, you did.
I believe in this being a sponsor of many things is that I'm just not going to hand you a check. I need to know how this check is going to work for me. What's going to be the return on investment for me? And if I can't see it in my head with or without you telling me, I probably won't write you a check.
Understood.
But the other thing too is that, you need to understand as the person putting the event out is that if you're just going out there and telling people, write me a check because you may or may not want my business, man, do you have the wrong idea and approach in mind? Like you're so far wrong in a lot of things. And unfortunately, that's what happens in a lot. I remember one time somebody wanted me to be a part of this magazine. Mm-hmm. And they're like, hey, be a part of this magazine and you can be a sponsor and it'd be great. You're going to get all this exposure for 40,000 different, clients that you want to get in front. Okay, great. So when do I get to meet these people? Well, we have several events throughout the year. Oh, okay. So do I get to host them? Do I work the crowd? Well, they're not really invited. Wait, who's not really invited? The sponsors. I was like, so wait, I'm sponsoring the event. Mm-hmm. I'm paying for your thing, but I don't even get to meet the people.
Very interesting.
And then I was like, well, I see that you have articles here. Do I get to interview the people? Maybe I could do this?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, no, we have people to do that. And I'm like, so when is it exactly I get to meet these people? And
what's the value that you're offering?
And they had nothing.
Such a good point. It's such a good point. And I mean, in terms of sponsors, I think that is what people sometimes think about doing. And you brought up a really good point, and setting the expectations with the sponsors.
Yes.
And understanding that if it's an outdoor tailgate and it rains, right. We have those fail safes because we've all been there. What the sponsors then know, and I think from the beginning,
that's easy, by the way.
Yeah,
just go into the Link parking lot.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
You're good.
Yeah, that's a pro tip.
Yep.
But also just setting the expectation from the beginning in terms of who's going to be invited. There will be a thorough email with explanations on the venue and who attended and who's going to get the contact list. And it's more than just your logo being on a flyer. Because I feel like that's just tired of that type of approach. Hey, send me your vector file of your logo and send me a check for $250, $500 and you'll get so much exposure.
Right.
It's no different than the magazine story.
Of course.
So.
Well, I mean, the other thing goes in there too is that if I can, if I'm a sponsor and my name and my logo are somewhere, okay, great. But now, do I get an opportunity to mingle with people? Because I will bet on me all day.
Always.
And so if I can go there at the same time and my logo's behind me, okay, sure, great. But also now, do I have something else that I would rather have? Exclusivity? Sure. Now, and if I can't, okay, great. Then now my contribution goes down a little bit because it's you're saying anybody else can be there. Well, doesn't really appeal to me as much. Yeah. But then the other thing too is do I know what kind of events this person throws? You know what I mean? Is it my event where I'm doing something intentional for there's a whole strategy behind it? Because that's how I throw an event. Because I get 10 to 15 people together, and I already know that I'm going to put 2 or 3 people together at that event.
That's great.
You know what I mean? That's my whole goal. I couldn't get you to talk to this person, and then I put you to an Eagles tailgate, Phillies tailgate, whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, Jay, meet such and such, blah, blah, blah. I've been trying to introduce you guys forever. All right, see you later. And then I go somewhere else, and I let you talk.
Yep.
Right. And then from there, I know you're guys going to get together, but there's got to be something there. And if there's not, and you just throw a big banger, well,
I love that idea of pre-contemplating. I'm already going to connect these people at this event. Yeah. That's so important because then
I had a great time and I got business.
Yeah. I mean, that's the real mission. But at the same time, it's almost you're leading. You're already setting yourself up for success having that plan.
Yes.
Let's see how we're doing. We got a little bit of extra time. If you want to touch on what's next for the title industry, do you believe that there's any shifting going on, some pivoting for Core or for you personally?
We're always innovating. The next thing that we're looking to do is try to figure out the best way that we can not only give the best service to our clients each and every time, but you touched on it earlier, is helping them out with their business. Mm-hmm. So we're always exploring new opportunities to do just that. Ideally, I'll knock on wood, but not this table because I was told not to.
Yeah, right.
Is that, we'll have some good things coming down the pipe. So we're excited about that. The industry as a whole, obviously the NAR settlement was big for a lot of agents locally. I just think in general, I went through it, the lenders went through it. You adapt. There's going to be an adjustment period, where people will eventually figure it out. We've had seminar after seminar. I've attended at least 4 or 5 by this time. We have some great mentors in the industry. And I think past that part is people just need to adapt, and then when they realize that something went wrong, figure out what they did wrong or what they could, immediately control or inspire change within themselves, their business or their clients. And then past that, you just, you keep on going until you, zero in on what you want to do.
It's a great conclusion to it. Wraps everything up, even back to, some of the interpersonal conversations you might have with someone checking in saying, hey, here's some feedback, whether it's an employee, whether it's a spouse, whether, it's a referral partner. I think, one of the main pieces of this conversation is constant check-ins with all these levels of people in your life and continuing to treat people like people in a relationship and less transactional. And that might be the success that you listeners need to get up and running on the networking scene. But as always, Brian's available, I'm available. Our socials, all this stuff is going to be plugged in the bottom of this.
Cool.
If you are a young professional looking to get into the networking scene, need some help, want to collaborate, or just say, hey, I liked what you guys were talking about for that 45 minutes to an hour in here.
Yeah.
Give us a shout out. So with that, that's the end of the show.
Awesome.
Appreciate you coming on, Bri.
Dude, thank you.
Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it.